I never thought a person I had raised with my own hands could one day become the architect of my destruction. Not in a million years. And yet, here I am, staring at the ruins of everything I thought I knew, my home, my trust, my peace. It all started the day he walked into my life like a stray shadow, vulnerable, lost, and somehow, magnetic. I live in a quiet suburb, just outside Chicago. My life had been comfortable, maybe even a little mundane. I had my routines: morning coffee on the terrace, work at the publishing house downtown, evenings curled up with a good book, or cooking for my family. Life was calm, predictable, and I liked it that way. Until Donald arrived. He was 15, fragile, and trembling the first time I saw him. His mother, a friend of mine from college, had just passed away, leaving him an orphan in a world that seemed far too cruel for someone so young. I didn't hesitate. I had always wanted children, but life had a funny way of keeping them away. Donald became my son, not by blood, but by love and circumstance. I promised myself that I would protect him, teach him, and love him unconditionally. The first few years were beautiful in that deceptively ordinary way that happiness often is. Donald was clever, witty, and surprisingly compassionate for someone who had lost so much. We spent weekends biking around the city, baking cookies on rainy afternoons, and talking about everything from school struggles to the absurdities of life. I began to see him not just as my responsibility, but as my son in every way that mattered. But beneath his easy smile, I started noticing small cracks, tiny moments of deception that I brushed off because, well, he was a teenager. Everyone lies when they are 16, right? He borrowed money from friends and never told me, sneaked out late at night, lied about where he was going. I thought I was overreacting. I was a mother, not a jailer. It wasn't until he turned 18 that the first real alarm bells rang. He asked to take over some of the finances in my household, insisting he could help me save money and invest smarter. I hesitated but ultimately agreed, partly because I trusted him and partly because I wanted to believe in the man he would become. And that's when the subtle manipulations began. A missing check here, an unusual withdrawal there, small enough that I doubted my own memory, but enough to make my stomach knot. I confronted him once, gently, thinking it was an honest mistake. He laughed it off, that charming, infuriating laugh, and promised he'd be more careful. I believed him. Fast forward a few months, and Donald's charm had grown into something dangerously persuasive. He started introducing me to people I barely knew, friends with sharp suits and sharper eyes, people who seemed too slick to be trustworthy. He insisted I trust them, and because I trusted him, I did. Then came the day I realized he had taken out a line of credit in my name. The first notice arrived in the mail, subtle and almost polite, like it didn't belong to a criminal act. I froze, my hands shaking, my heart pounding. My Donald, my sweet, adopted son, had done this. Surely it was a mistake. But the deeper I dug, the more I uncovered: money siphoned into accounts I had never seen, credit cards opened under my name, loans I hadn't authorized. And every confrontation was met with that same deflecting grin, the same manipulation. He apologized, made excuses, and somehow made me feel guilty for doubting him. It hurt more than I can explain. The betrayal cut deeper than any heartbreak I had known. How could someone I raised with love, patience, and sacrifice turn into this? I tried reasoning with him, pleaded with him, cried in front of him. He didn't flinch. And that was the first time I realized this wasn't about money. It wasn't about mischief or teenage rebellion. This was intentional. Cold. Calculated. And that's when my home, the one place I had always felt safe, began to feel like a trap. Every creak of the floor, every locked drawer, every unexplained email made me wonder, What had he done this time? What would he do next? I remember sitting at the kitchen table one night, staring at the stack of bills, the warnings, the growing mountain of debt, and thinking I had failed him as a mother. If I had raised him differently, if I had been stricter, would he have become this person? Or was he always like this, and I had been blinded by my own desire to love, to nurture, to believe in the goodness of someone who wasn't mine by blood, but had my heart completely? The phone rang, a shrill sound that made my nerves jump. It was the bank again, asking questions I couldn't answer, demanding payments I didn't have. And then I heard it, a voice, calm, almost teasing. "Mom, we need to talk." I froze. His voice, sweet and familiar, now carried an undertone I couldn't recognize. It was the voice of someone who had grown beyond innocence into something dangerous. And at that moment, I realized I was standing on the edge of a storm, and the one I had raised to trust most was the one who had brought it to my doorstep. I didn't know then that his next move would not just ruin my finances, but shatter my home, betray my closest friends, and leave me questioning everything I thought I knew about love, family, and loyalty. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly. Emails, calls, texts, each one a little dagger in my chest. I barely slept, haunted by the memory of his voice from the night before, the calm menace behind that familiar tone. Donald had never sounded threatening before. Now, it was like I was dealing with someone I didn't know at all. I tried to confront him that day. I found him in the study, casually scrolling through his laptop, a picture of innocence and charm as he always was. But the room smelled faintly of expensive cologne, the kind you buy to impress someone you barely know. His eyes met mine, and I realized he was testing me. "Donald," I began, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me, "we need to talk about the bank statements, the withdrawals." He smiled, and it was almost unbearable how natural he looked. "Mom, you worry too much," he said softly, closing the laptop with a casual click. "I've got it all under control. You should trust me. I'm just trying to help." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But the stack of letters from the bank told a different story. I didn't just have suspicions anymore. I had proof, mounting evidence that he was not the boy I had raised. Over the next few days, the tension in the house became unbearable. I started noticing little things, receipts that didn't make sense, packages arriving at odd hours, friends of his that disappeared as quickly as they appeared. Every time I tried to ask him, he deflected, joked, or guilt-tripped me. I hated how easily he could twist my love for him into doubt about myself. Then came the party. Donald had insisted I attend, saying he wanted me to meet his business associates. It was a lavish affair at our home, catered by some boutique company I had never heard of. I walked in, feeling like a stranger in my own house. Guests mingled in the living room, glasses of champagne in hand, laughing and networking. I caught glimpses of my own belongings subtly rearranged, art pieces moved, furniture shifted. It was almost like the house itself was turning against me. And there he was, at the center of it all, looking like the young man I had raised, only sharper now, more confident, more commanding. People listened to him, hung on his every word, and I realized he had built a world around himself without me. My house, my home, my sanctuary, had become his stage. That night, I overheard a conversation that froze my blood. "And once we secure the funding, we'll move on the property. She'll never see it coming," a man whispered. Donald's laugh followed, light, teasing, but it had a sinister edge I had never heard before. "Don't worry. Everything's under control. She trusts me completely." I stepped back into the shadows, heart pounding. It couldn't be real. Could it? The boy I had raised, the boy I had loved as my own, was planning to take everything from me. Days turned into weeks, and Donald's schemes became bolder. Money disappeared from accounts I didn't even know existed. Friends and neighbors started noticing odd behavior, invitations I never sent, events I had no knowledge of. And through it all, Donald maintained that mask of innocence, his eyes shining with the same warmth I remembered from his childhood. One evening, after another exhausting confrontation, I found myself crying in the kitchen, hands pressed to my face. I asked myself the same question over and over. How did I fail him? How did I raise someone who could look at me, the woman who had given him everything, and decide to destroy my life? But the final blow came unexpectedly. I had always believed that family, love, and loyalty could withstand anything. That night, I discovered a series of messages on his phone, messages to a lawyer, a real estate agent, and even a former friend of mine, detailing a plan to claim the house, liquidate assets, and leave me with nothing. Every word was calculated, cruel, deliberate. I felt my world collapse. My son, my own flesh and blood in every sense except biology, had become a stranger, a predator disguised in familiar skin. I wanted to scream, to run, to demand answers, but the truth was paralyzing. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't youthful rebellion. This was betrayal at the deepest, most personal level. The next morning, I woke to find a letter slipped under my door. No name, no signature, just a single line. You should have seen this coming. I dropped the letter, heart racing. Donald's betrayal wasn't just a secret anymore, it was a declaration. He wanted me to know he was in control, and he was enjoying it. I realized then that I had to act. I couldn't let him continue, but confronting him directly felt impossible. Every attempt to reason, to appeal to the boy I thought I knew, ended with laughter or manipulation. And the terrifying truth was this: the closer I got to him, the more dangerous he became. That night, I lay awake in the bedroom, listening to the creaks and whispers of a house I no longer recognized as mine. My heart ached, my mind spun with disbelief, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly powerless. And then, the sound of footsteps outside my room froze me. Slow, deliberate, familiar. "Mom," a voice called softly, almost tenderly. "We need to talk." The same words. The same tone. Only now, I wasn't sure whether to run, or to prepare for a confrontation I might not survive emotionally. I didn't know that the conversation about to happen that night would reveal not just Donald's ultimate betrayal, but a secret he had kept from me for years, one that would shake the very foundation of my life and make me question everything I thought I knew about love, family, and trust. I didn't move. I couldn't. The footsteps outside my bedroom stopped for a moment, and then, with a slow creak, the door opened. Donald stood there, silhouetted by the hallway light, calm, collected, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I felt the old comfort, the boy I had once held in my arms, the one who had clung to me in the middle of the night, but that feeling shattered instantly. "Mom," he said again, softer this time, almost tender. "We need to talk." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Talk about what, Donald?" "About the bank. About my house. About everything." He stepped into the room, carefully, as though he were approaching someone fragile. "Not everything, just some things you need to understand." The calmness in his voice made my chest tighten. I wanted to believe him, to hope for some explanation that could undo the nightmare I was living. But deep down, I knew, this was the calm before the storm. Then he said it. The words that would change everything. "You've raised me, loved me, but you've also underestimated me. And that's your mistake." I blinked, confused, hurt, terrified. "Donald. I don't understand. Why are you doing this?" He laughed softly, and it was the laugh I remembered, but colder, sharper, like glass cutting through velvet. Doing what, Mom? I'm only doing what I had to do. You taught me to be smart, to seize opportunities, to survive. You just never imagined I'd take it this far. My heart was racing. Every word felt like a punch. I could barely breathe. You've destroyed everything I built for you. You've betrayed me in every possible way. How can you? Donald shook his head slowly. You think betrayal is what I did to the bank, the house, your friends, but that's just the beginning. You never saw it coming because you always saw me as your son, not the man I was becoming. I wanted to run, to scream, to demand answers, but I couldn't. The truth was weighing me down like concrete. Then what? What do you want from me? His eyes softened for a fraction of a second, and I felt a pang of that old love, the boy I once knew. But it was gone in an instant. I want freedom, Mom. Freedom from limits, from your rules, your expectations. You made me see the world, and now I'm claiming it. I stumbled back, tears streaming down my face. You're leaving me with nothing. He shook his head, almost apologetically. Not nothing. I'm giving you a chance to see the truth. To see that love alone isn't enough. You raised me, and now I'm showing you what that really means. The next few days were a blur. Donald executed his plan with precision I couldn't have imagined. Accounts were emptied, assets transferred, and by the time I realized the full extent of his actions, it was too late. My home, my sanctuary, was no longer mine. My friends avoided me, some quietly severing ties, others looking at me with suspicion. And all the while, Donald remained calm, almost distant, as though he had been waiting for this moment his entire life. Then came the revelation that shattered me entirely. I was going through his old things, trying desperately to find something, anything, that could explain why he had turned against me, when I found a hidden folder on his laptop. Inside were documents, photos, and emails, a secret he had kept from me for years. Donald hadn't just acted alone. He had been planning this long before I even took him in. There were correspondences with people I trusted, detailing my habits, my finances, my vulnerabilities. Every time I had believed he was a child needing love, he had been watching, learning, calculating. And the most painful discovery of all, he had been manipulating me from the start. The affection, the smiles, the charm, they were all tools to gain my trust, to understand how far he could push me, to see exactly where my limits were. I had raised a prodigy of betrayal, a master manipulator, and it was my own love that had blinded me. I confronted him with the evidence. I remember the moment vividly, the two of us standing in the living room, his arms crossed, a faint smile on his face, as I held the laptop like a weapon. Donald, why? Why would you do this? I asked, voice trembling. He tilted his head, almost pitying me. Why? Because someone had to survive. Because someone had to take what they were owed. You raised me to be strong, Mom, and I am. You just didn't recognize it as the same strength you taught me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to beg him to stop. But I couldn't. The reality was crushing. I had nurtured the person who had destroyed my life. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I discovered the final piece of his plan, a hidden clause in the property documents. Donald had ensured himself with legal control over everything, and if I resisted, I would face public humiliation, financial ruin, and social exile. He had thought of everything, every angle, every outcome. My trust had been weaponized against me. I sank to the floor, shaking, unable to comprehend the depth of his betrayal. And then, through the haze of tears and heartbreak, I realized something terrifying. Donald had grown beyond me. Beyond the love I had given him, beyond the moral compass I thought I had instilled. He had become his own force, beautiful, brilliant, and utterly destructive. I thought the betrayal had ended with the house and my finances, but I had no idea that Donald had one final move planned, a revelation that would not only shatter the remnants of my life, but force me to confront a dark family secret I had never imagined existed. I had spent the night awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment with Donald in my mind. How could I have been so blind? How could someone I had loved with every fiber of my being turn into the person standing across from me now, cold, calculating, untouchable? My sanctuary, my life, my identity, everything was in his hands. The next morning, I received an envelope in the mail. No stamp, no sender. Just my name, neatly typed, and inside, a single USB drive. I hesitated, trembling, but curiosity and dread compelled me to plug it into my laptop. What I saw made my blood run cold. There were videos, documents, and audio recordings, evidence of conversations between Donald and people from my past, plans to take over not just my assets, but my reputation, my social standing, even to manipulate my closest friends into doubting me. And then, at the very bottom, a file labeled, Mom, the Truth. I clicked. The video began, and there he was, Donald, speaking directly into the camera, calm, precise, almost eerily composed. Mom, I want you to know something before everything else falls apart, he began. I wasn't just taking what you built. I was uncovering the truth about our family. About you. My hands shook. Truth. What truth? I whispered to myself. He continued, explaining in that same calm voice how he had discovered long-hidden secrets about my past. Secrets I had buried even from myself. There had been betrayals, lies, and manipulations in my own family that had shaped the way I raised him, decisions I had made that I thought were protecting him, but in reality, had left him vulnerable and angry. He had known about my mother's past mistakes, about the business partnerships that had collapsed, the financial pressures I had never admitted, and how I had sacrificed so much for appearances. He had watched, studied, and decided that the only way to free himself from those hidden chains was to dismantle the world I had created around me. It wasn't just revenge, it was revelation. I felt the weight of everything crash down on me. I had raised him with love, yes, but I had also unknowingly handed him the keys to expose the fragility of my life. And he had done it meticulously, methodically, like a chess master. When he finally returned home that evening, I was waiting. The confrontation was inevitable. Mom, he said, standing in the doorway, the old charm flickering briefly across his features. Have you watched the video? I nodded, tears streaming. I have. I understand now. But why? Why destroy everything? He looked at me with a strange mixture of sorrow and triumph. Because love isn't enough, Mom. I had to see the truth for myself. And I had to show you that life doesn't wait for morality or kindness. Sometimes, it demands action, even if it hurts. I realized then that I was standing at a crossroads. I could scream, fight, and hate him forever. Or I could see this as a test, a brutal, excruciating lesson in human nature, love, and resilience. I raised you to be strong, Donald, I said quietly. But strength without conscience, without empathy, is dangerous. You've learned, but I fear the cost. He didn't answer. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Perhaps even human. And in that moment, I understood that despite everything, he was still the boy I had once held close. Still flawed, still learning, still my son. Over the following months, the aftermath was chaotic. I had to rebuild my finances, repair relationships, and reclaim my home, but I did it with a new sense of clarity. I realized that trust is precious and love, though powerful, can be blinded by its own intensity. Donald, for his part, distanced himself, not out of hatred, but to forge his own path, to live the lessons he had carved through my life. And as painful as it was, I forgave him, not to absolve him, but to release myself from the torment of bitterness. I learned that sometimes, the people we raise, love, and protect will hurt us in ways we cannot anticipate. Sometimes, they will become mirrors, reflecting back the flaws, the secrets, and the truths we hide even from ourselves. Standing in my restored home, I felt a strange peace. The house had survived, my friends had returned, and I had rebuilt not just walls and floors, but my heart. I knew I would never forget the pain Donald had caused, but I also knew that life had given me an unshakable lesson. Love is powerful, but wisdom, caution, and self-awareness are equally vital. And somewhere out there, Donald was building his own life, strong, brilliant, dangerous, and, in his own way, free. I smiled, a bittersweet smile, because despite the devastation, despite the betrayal, I had survived. And I had learned that sometimes, the hardest lessons come from the people we love the most. Love alone cannot protect us from betrayal. Trust must be earned, vigilance must coexist with care, and the people we nurture may become the very mirrors of our own blind spots. Pain can destroy, but it can also teach, rebuild, and transform. In the end, survival isn't just about keeping a home, it's about understanding life's harsh truths, embracing resilience, and forgiving, even when forgiveness seems impossible.